Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, then my name is Katie. I'm a full-time sketchbook artist, and today I'm going to be using something new. If you've been on my channel before, you'll know that I generally create a lot of texture and I use a lot of painty marks, and I'm very loose with my work. I don't rely on line very much, but today I'm going to be testing a new material and using a Sailor Fude De Mannen fountain pen. So today's work is going to be heavily focused on line. I'm going to be doing some urban sketching using Google Maps, and then I'm going to use some watercolour on top. So I'm going to walk you through the process. We're going to do it real time, and I'm just going to talk as I work, so hopefully it's interesting for you to see my process, especially when I'm trying a new technique. This is a very interesting fountain pen, and you'll see why later, because the nib is definitely very specialist, but I'm really looking forward to trying it out, and I hope you enjoy watching. So I'm going to be working in my Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. This is the 500 series, so the mixed media paper. This is the information if you're interested. I find this works really well with watercolour. So I am going to be using the Sailor Fude fountain pen with watercolour today, and I find this paper holds it really well. So here is the fountain pen in question. It looks like a standard fountain pen at first. It's got a green barrel. These are really widely available, so I bought mine in Japan, but you can get them on Cult Pens here in the UK, and there's plenty of other places, and they're very affordable as well. I think they're a really good price, and you'll also see a lot of artists use them. So I do see them a lot on Instagram, especially by urban sketches, and that's going to influence the art that we're going to make today. So I'm going to do some urban scenes. I found some views on Google Maps. It's one of my favourite places to find real urban scenes, not ones that have been curated and specifically set up for a shot, which sometimes you do find on stock image sites. So I really like using Google. It just feels a bit more realistic, and it means that I can find the view myself. So I did a little bit of searching. I went to Barcelona via Google Maps Street View, and I will leave links to the references that I'm using today, but I also encourage you to do the same thing on Google Maps. I've got a whole video. It's a little bit old now, but it's still got some good tips in there, so I'll leave that linked up in the cards. So like I said, it does look like a normal fountain pen. I do have a couple of other ones. I've got a TWSBI Eco and a Kuretake fountain pen, and I use these for journaling. These are just standard fountain pens that I put ink into. But the difference with this one, which is the Fude one, is the nib. So you can see here that it is at an angle. I think it's a 55-degree angle. I'll pop it on the screen. You can see it kind of looks like it's been bent. It looks wrong almost. Like it's not supposed to be like that, but it means that we can get some really interesting marks. But before I start, I do just want to change the inks. So I didn't realise this, but it was quite helpful that it does come with a cartridge. So if I unscrew here, oops, two cartridges actually. There are two here, but I want to be able to use watercolour on top of this, and the ink that it comes with, which is also by Sailor, it's just a black ink, isn't going to be waterproof. So what I've done, and also to save me from having to buy a lot of cartridges in the future, is I've bought some waterproof ink. So this is called Sketch ink. I've never used this before. This is going to be a completely different style to what I'm usually creating like, so this is going to be quite an interesting video, I think. This is by Rohrer and Klingner, and then because obviously I can't put that into a cartridge, I've also bought a Sailor fountain pen converter. So you just attach this to the fountain pen, I'm hoping, and then fill it with the waterproof ink. Like I said, I am a total novice with this, and this style is going to be different, but I think that's always really interesting to try new things, try new mediums, and like I said at the beginning, just see where it takes me. So let's speed this up a little bit. I'm going to put this converter in, and then I'll fill it with the sketch ink. Okay, so I've just drawn it up. It's like a twist thing. And now I can put this body back on instead of just clipping in and like pushing in one of these ink cartridges. You just push in the converter and then draw up the ink like that. So I really like how that works. It's very similar to my TWSBI Eco in the way that I filled that one. And what I'm going to do is actually get some scrap paper just to try out some mark making and see what the type of lines are for this interesting fountain pen nib. So I did say scrap paper, but I've actually just grabbed my Royal Talons. This is my sort of messy sketchbook where I just experiment with. So I've just flipped to the back, and like I said, I've not used this before, so I do think it will be helpful to just play around with the marks before I go in and create some actual artwork. So I think we're just going to play around. Ooh, that's nice. You can create really, really thick lines because obviously when I'm putting that angle straight down, oh, I really like the thickness of that line. And then taper it off as you change the angle of the pen to the paper. That's nice. I think it feels weird because I'm so used to thin lines. I think you can, wow, look at that. You can get super, super thick and then very, very, very fine. I think it's definitely going to take a bit of getting used to. I think I want to try and see how to taper it off in one go. At the moment, I'm just sort of finding how to move the angle and just playing around. So playing around with mark making is a really interesting exercise anyway that I think you should do with your mediums. It's interesting that I'm automatically sort of turning it around. I hold my pen at this angle naturally, so I'm automatically getting quite a thick line, and I wonder how it feels quite unnatural to sort of hold it like this to get a super thick one. On the side doesn't work. Behind and holding it like this gets that super thin one. I think I'm going to have to be careful I don't want super thick lines the whole time. Interestingly, I feel like the only way to get the variation is to change the angle. So I'm used to, with brush pens, of getting thick line when I press hard and then pressing lighter, getting thin lines. But for this one, that doesn't work. You have to change the angle. So there's going to be quite a lot of lines in the architecture and things that I want to draw. So let's test it out by drawing an idea of a building. I don't have a reference, so sometimes it does skip. That's probably just the way that I'm holding it. I really like the texture when you're doing it quite fast. Sometimes it's not coming out. That's an idea of a building anyway. So I really like the textures here. I think that's really nice. And we can also come in with the super, super fine lines as well when I hold it that way. So this is going to be quite interesting. I think it's going to be harder than I expected, which is always a good thing. It's good to challenge ourselves as artists. So let's get my references up and we'll start the actual artwork. Okay, so you'll know that I don't often sketch first, but I'm going to with this just to try and get the angles right, and because this is an urban scene and I'm not used to that. So I'm still going to simplify things a lot, and then I'll come in with my line work. So usually how I work is I will put down block shapes and block colours. We did a whole month about this on Patreon where I was testing out putting line work down first, because usually I add that on later and I don't often rely on lines much. So that was a really interesting month, and there are replays for that on my Patreon, but I did find that I preferred working by putting down colour first and then defining it with some details on top. Whereas with this one, I'm still trying to simplify things quite a lot, but I do want to get the angles right, and I'm not worried. I do get asked a lot about perspective and I'm never too worried about that. I love a bit of wonkiness. I always say that adds to the charm. So I think a bit of wonkiness is okay. I'm not trying to get everything perfect, but I'm trying to get the main shapes down. And we can always neaten things up later, which I'm definitely going to have to do. But if you like this sort of thing, I do just want to do a cheeky plug of my Patreon, because we do sessions like this on YouTube, which are live, and I also film tutorials, which are real speed like this for requests for my patrons, depending on what they want to learn to draw. And this is generally how I sort of teach, but it's nice to do them on YouTube every now and again also. I think that's about it really for this one. So let's go in with ink, I guess. I've got my fountain pen, and I guess I'll start at the top. And I want quite thin lines up here, so I'm going to try and hold it. I'm still going to go quite loose and scratchy. I don't want any super thick lines, but I think I might accidentally do one when I forget to change the angle, so we'll deal with that when it comes. But it's quite helpful having those starting lines already. This is definitely at more of an angle than I've got it, but we'll make that work. We'll just work with the lines I've already got rather than worrying about it being perfect. And I think that's a really big part of my style, is not worrying about things being perfect. And I'm not going to start a new one. I don't want to have a super precise sketch. I don't want it to be perfect. I kind of want it to have that charm. I want it to have that wonkiness and imperfections, because to me, I find that the most interesting thing. So I can tell I'm being a little bit hesitant with my marks, obviously because this is all quite new for me. And interestingly, maybe it's the stock, but I'm finding I'm putting down the nib and I'm not getting as thick lines, which is good. I don't want super thick lines. I do want a bit of variation because I think that's the beauty of the ink, but we'll see how we go. I don't want to use a ruler. That really puts me off creating, and I don't want to do that. So for me, we'll just keep our hand as steady as we can. So there is some shading here. So some of this is in shadows. I don't know if it's just the thick. So the Royal Talons is obviously very smooth, and there's a bit of tooth to this Strathmore. So I wonder if that's what's affecting the lines, probably. But I'm liking this effect, so I'm not upset about that. I mean, it does look quite messy, and I've seen a lot of artists create super neat, beautiful artwork, and I mean, that's not me anyway, so that's okay. This is looking quite rough. Let's put in the man. It's very hard to see, and I think that's also a good thing. So you might have your Google Maps and be trying to find a perfect reference, but actually I think the beauty of it is, you know, a lot of things are going to be a bit blurred or a bit out of focus, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So maybe embrace that and go with it, because it's amazing what your brain can do. I think a lot of the times we do rely on very finished, very curated references from stock images, and I think it might be a good thing if maybe we don't sometimes, and then we can change things about and we feel a little bit more able to edit things. There's also a traffic light here. That might be a nice pop of yellow, so actually I will include that. That would be nice to add in a nice bit of yellow with the watercolour. So yeah, you can use your own photos, but if you don't have many or you haven't travelled as far or to places that you'd like to draw, Google Maps is a really great way for that. It's also a lot cheaper. And I just find it's a really nice way to practice drawings. I used it quite a lot when I was doing my daily art challenge. So the 100-day one and the year-long one that I did, I found it really helpful to, when I wasn't sure what to draw, to just sort of do a random pin drop on Google Maps. It's also a nice way to practice vegetation, because obviously you can draw things around you, but there'll be things that, and tree types and different shapes of trees that you won't get around you. So that's a really nice way to draw different architecture and different things in the landscape and just practice a bit more. I'm finding that the turning upside down, which I did a lot on that Royal Talons test, isn't really working on this paper, so I think that's an interesting observation. Okay, I think we'll call it there. So I'm not going to include a lot of details. You can really see the difference here where I've got a bit more confident by using slightly thicker lines. So this is where I started. So I'm just going to add in a bit of thickness just to try and balance it with the rest of the image. I'm going to move on to the next one and then we'll come back with colour. Let's do one that spreads this whole thing. So I think we'll do 2 images today, and then I'll come in and do real time with the watercolour. Okay, so my line work is done. I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. I really love some of the textures. This is obviously a very different style to my usual painting, but it's fun to try something different, and I really am liking this so far. So we're going to add colour next, and it's probably no surprise that I am going to be using my Kuretake set. This is the Art Nouveau colourway that I've amended a little bit. So this is Gansai Tambi watercolours. I've got a video on my channel where I've changed out and switched up a few colours. So I've added in some more greens, a yellow and a blue. And I really love this palette. I really love these watercolours, so I'm going to use them today. I'm also going to be using a mop brush. This is the size 5 by Artway. So let's start adding colour. I think this will really bring this one to life. I'm really liking the line work as it is, but I think adding some colour will really help add some energy into here. So I'm going to start with blues. I'm just looking at the reference and there isn't many clouds in the sky here. There's a few down here, but I love adding texture to my sky, so I'm going to pretend that there is some. Obviously the white's not going to show up great on the paper, but I'm going to sort of go around it with my blue. I want really big marks. I'm currently going around the pen, but I will be going straight on top of it when I'm colouring in the trees, so we can see just how well this ink works in terms of how waterproof it is, hopefully very. So watercolour is still a very new medium for me, but I really enjoy playing with it. I'm also going to add some swatches down here. I've got this big gap here, which I didn't really think about when I was picking this reference. I was planning on doing 3, but I really like how this turned out, so I'm just going to add my swatches down here. The ground here is kind of like a grey. I don't have a cool grey in this palette, so I'm actually just going to be mixing up a very warm grey and adding some cream as well. Again, I am trying to keep this nice and loose. There is some shadows, so we'll add that in. So I am trying to be really loose with my brushwork. I don't want to be filling in every single detail. I don't want to be worrying about the edges of things. I really want it to be nice and loose. So we'll just add in some shadows here. I'm going to do the building next. I kind of just dot about the page, so as you can see I'm not sticking to just one of the images. I'm using the colour on my brush to go around the page with that colour, and that kind of helps things to stay a little bit cleaner and not muddy things up, because if I just did that one and went on to the greens next, I'd have to go get a new water and I'd be worried about this being dirty. So it's just an easier way, and it also means that it's a bit more cohesive because I am using the same colours. I don't mind where some colours merge, but I also do want to go around somewhere I know I want it to be super clean colour. So this yellow traffic light I'm trying to avoid because I want to put in that blob of yellow. I need this front bit to be slightly darker. And I could wait for it to dry and layer it on top, but being a little bit impatient here. So I just want it to be fun, and I feel like this is feeling fun for me, so that's really good. I just want to enjoy my time whenever I create artwork. So okay, I think that's it for those colours. I am going to go on to my greens next. Let's just add in that pop of colour for the traffic light, just because I really don't want to forget about that. And now let's add in our greens. So I've got plenty of greens in my palette, and again I'm just going to try and merge that in. So I'll keep coming in back to my palette and try and create some really varied greens, because there's a lot of trees back here and they're all slightly different shades. But I'm still trying to use really loose lines. I think that's the beauty of a mop brush. It does hold a lot of water, and it means you can be super loose because it is such a flexible brush. I'll come over here and start adding to this park. So I can go over this tree trunk because I know that the brown that I'm going to add on later will go over that green. If I wanted it to stay white, then I could avoid it, or I could add masking fluid, for example. Let's try and add in some shadows here whilst the paint is wet, so we can get a nice wet on wet technique. So I'm trying to mix up lots of different greens really, because I want the trees to be quite distinct from the grass. Let's also add in some swatches. So the trees in the distance are darker, so I can use my darker greens there. I'm not cleaning my brush in between, I'm just sort of letting the greens on the brush mix in. So I'll bring in that nice bright green as well from that side of the spread, so that links it in really nicely, I think. And again, I'm just mixing up lots of different greens so I can kind of see the way this tree is growing. So I'm going to try and mimic that with my brush strokes. I want it darker towards the bottom where there's more shadows. There's also some up there. And I'm using some of the marks I put down with my brush pen to sort of go around that, so that's where I'll put in some more shadows. Oh, that's looking quite nice. I really like the way that it blends together as well. So this tree is again another totally different shade, so I might try and mix one up. It's a bit more blue toned, I think. Let's try that. And you can just layer on your greens. I really like working in this way, it's very fluid and a little bit unpredictable, which is always a bit of fun. So I can build on top here where I want it to be a little bit darker. That's with watercolour. I just want to create a little bit more of a rich colour. I can add in some shadows so I can see the sun is on the left. I missed the background there, let's fill that in. So I think next is adding in the brown for the tree trunks. It's not super dark, but I think that's okay. I can always add on a bit more, a few more layers to make it a bit darker later on. I want to add in some shadow here, so you can see I kind of try to mimic the shadows a little bit with my marks with the ink pen, but I enjoyed doing that. Usually I just use colour, but it was nice to use my marks for that. So I think, oh, we forgot the tree trunks over here. Because I do sort of dot about the page, it does, sometimes I miss things. I once drew the Brighton Pavilion without the actual dome on the top because I was dotting about the page, and then I got really annoyed with myself for forgetting it. Nobody called me out on it, but that's all I think about when I see that sketchbook spread now. So it's important for me to look around it and try and spot anything before I put my paints away, because I won't get them back out to fill it in. And because I am quite an impulsive painter and like moving around the page, I do miss stuff. So I'm just trying to catch that now. And like, you can keep adding to this. Add as many layers as you'd like. I am just going to come back to this building here, or this arch, but I want to darken that up a little bit. Now that first layer's dried, that just feels a lot richer, which is nice. Gotta be careful of my traffic light, I was so careful of putting in. Okay, I'm just going to add in a dark green to my little swatch palette down here in the corner. I haven't put all the colours here, but I've put the main colours that I've used, and obviously these have been mixed in with each other. Okay, there we go. So I think that's it now. I think I'm done. I'm happy with that. Like I said, you can keep adding, but I really need to stop now. I think I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to add in some annotations. I want to add in some text around here, so I'm going to try writing with the fountain pen, and I'll come back when it's completely dry. Okay, there we go. I find it a lot easier to add on any text or writing when I'm not chatting and talking. So I did film a little bit of it, which you'll have just seen, and I'm really pleased with this spread. It feels very different for me, but I still really like it. It's still got elements of me in there. It's still got my colour palette. I love these greens, and it feels very fluid. There's a lot of energy here. I really like the looseness of it all, and I know it is very different to my usual style of my painting, and perhaps it's not something that you'd necessarily think of as mine, but I'm really happy with it. I think it's always really good to try new things, to try new mediums as well as new techniques and different styles, because I might take something from this and apply it to my usual style of painting later down the line. So even if it's totally different for you, I still recommend giving it a go. I think that you learn a lot from doing art that way, so hopefully this has inspired you to try something new and something different. I really enjoyed using this Fude fountain pen. I found it really interesting. I really love some of the textures. I prefer the texture in here of using the nib than I did in my Royal Talons. I like some of the scratchiness, and I wasn't getting like super thick lines. I was still able to get those, but it felt really easy to use. I enjoyed using the ink pen in this way and then adding the colour on top. So the sketch ink that I used, which was from Rohrer and Klingner, this is just the black sketch ink. I really enjoyed this. It obviously was waterproof, which is what we needed it to be, and it worked out really, really well. It didn't smudge at all, and it feels like it's really fast drying. I'm very impressed with that and the Sailor pen itself. So I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you so much for coming along with me and watching the process. I always want to say a big shout out to my patrons for allowing me to create videos like this. If you enjoyed this sort of style of video of chatting away whilst I paint, then you will probably enjoy my Patreon, so I'll leave a link down below. But a big thank you to them for their support, and a big thank you to you for watching this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it and that you have a creative week ahead. I will see you next Sunday in my next YouTube video. See you later.